I made the decision to visit my husband's mistress in the hospital. I needed to see her face to face, to look directly into her eyes and understand what she had that I didn't. But when I pushed open that hospital room door, everything I thought I knew shattered. The bag slipped from my trembling hands and my world came crashing down with it. I want to pause here. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I need you to tell me in the comments which city you're listening to this story of revenge from. I want to know just how far this message has traveled because what I'm about to share with you, it needs to be heard. The hospital corridors stretched endlessly before me that Tuesday afternoon, each step echoing against the polished linoleum like a countdown to my own execution. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that cold, sterile glow that makes everything look sickly and unreal. I clutched my leather purse against my chest like armor, my knuckles white from gripping the strap so tightly that my wedding ring, 32 years on my finger, cut into my skin. Room 314. I had memorized that number like a prayer, like a curse. It had taken me 3 weeks to work up the courage to come here, 3 weeks of sleepless nights and untouched meals, 3 weeks of watching my husband Corey slip away from me one lie at a time. But I was done being the fool. I was done pretending I didn't know. The scent of disinfectant burned my nostrils as I stood outside her door. Keisha Williams, 28 years old. That's all I knew about the woman who had been sharing my husband's bed for God knows how long. 28. I was already 30 when I married Corey, already building the foundation of what I thought would be our forever. She wasn't even born yet. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Through the small rectangular window, I could see the edge of a hospital bed, white sheets pristine and tucked tight. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my mirror at home. I would walk in with dignity, my head held high. I would look at her, really look at her, and I would ask her one simple question. Was he worth destroying a family for? I studied my breathing, the way I'd learned during 30 years as a registered nurse. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You've seen worse than this, Christine. You've held dying patients' hands. You've delivered news that shattered families. You can handle looking at one home-wrecking girl in a hospital bed. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I pushed open that door. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow across the room like some twisted romantic movie scene. And there, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, was my husband. My Corey. The man who had kissed me goodbye that morning and told me he was going to the office to catch up on paperwork. The man who had been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. He was holding a plastic spoon, carefully feeding applesauce to the woman lying in the bed. But it wasn't just the feeding that stopped my heart, it was the tenderness in his movements, the way he dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, the soft murmur of his voice as he whispered something that made her smile. A smile I recognized. It was the same smile he used to give me when I was sick with the flu during our first year of marriage, the same gentle attention he'd shown me when I had my gallbladder surgery 5 years ago. And there, catching the light as he lifted the spoon to her lips, was the watch. The anniversary watch. The one I had saved for 3 months to buy him last year, working extra shifts at the hospital, skipping lunches just to see his face light up on our 31st anniversary. The inscription on the back read, "Forever yours, Christine." He was wearing it while he fed another woman. Lakeisha wasn't what I had expected. She wasn't some glamorous temptress or sophisticated seductress. She looked young, vulnerable, with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and no makeup on her face. She looked like someone's daughter. She looked like someone I might have cared for as a patient. And the way Corey was looking at her, God help me, he was looking at her the way he used to look at me. My purse slipped from my numb fingers. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot, my wallet, my keys, my reading glasses, all scattering across the hospital floor in a symphony of betrayal. Corey's head snapped toward the door, the spoon frozen halfway to Lakeisha's mouth. His eyes met mine across that sterile room, and I watched 32 years of marriage die in the space of a heartbeat. His mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish gasping for air. Christine, But I was already backing away, my hand fumbling for the door frame behind me. I couldn't breathe. The antiseptic smell was choking me, the fluorescent lights were too bright, the sound of my own heartbeat was deafening in my ears. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to be the one in control. I was supposed to confront her, not him. Not like this. Not seeing him care for her the way he had once cared for me. I turned and ran. My nursing shoes squeaked against the linoleum as I fled down that endless corridor, past the nurses' station where my colleagues would have recognized me, past the visitors clutching flowers and balloons, past all the normal people living their normal lives while mine exploded behind me in room 314. I didn't stop running until I reached my car in the parking garage. Only then did I allow myself to fall apart, gripping the steering wheel as sobs tore through my chest like daggers. 32 years. 32 years of cooking his favorite meals, ironing his shirts, supporting his dreams, raising his children, building his home. 32 years, and he was feeding applesauce to a girl young enough to be our daughter. But as I sat there in that dim parking garage, something shifted inside me. Tears stopped. The shaking stopped. And for the first time in months, my mind became crystal clear. I went to that hospital to look my husband's mistress in the eye, but what I saw in that room changed everything. Because I realized that this wasn't just about an affair. This was about a man who could sit beside another woman's hospital bed and tend to her with the same hands that had once promised to cherish only me. This was about betrayal so deep, so complete that it required something more than tears. It required strategy. And lucky for me, I had just learned exactly what I was up against. But let me take you back to the beginning because you need to understand what was destroyed in that hospital room. You need to know what 32 years of devotion looks like when it crumbles in a single moment. I met Corey when I was 28, fresh out of nursing school and working the night shift at County General. He was 26, a first-year law student with holes in his shoes and dreams bigger than his empty wallet. He used to come into the hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning, nursing a single cup of coffee for 3 hours while he studied under the fluorescent lights. I thought he was homeless at first. Just poor, he told me that first night I approached him with an extra sandwich from my dinner break. But not for long. I believed him. More than that, I invested in him. While other women my age were dating men with established careers and steady paychecks, I was falling in love with potential. I was working 60-hour weeks as a nurse while Corey buried himself in law books, and I didn't mind. When his student loans weren't enough to cover both tuition and rent, I picked up extra shifts. When he needed suits for interviews, I shopped clearance racks and learned to tailor them myself. When he was too stressed to cook or clean or remember to eat, I became his everything. You're building our future, I used to tell myself during those exhausting double shifts, my feet aching in those uncomfortable nursing shoes, my hands raw from constant hand-washing. This sacrifice means something. For 3 years, I lived on 4 hours of sleep and instant ramen so Corey could focus on becoming the lawyer he dreamed of being. I watched him graduate summa cum laude from the same hospital cafeteria where we met, tears streaming down my face as he walked across that stage. He found me in the crowd afterward, lifted me up and spun me around and whispered in my ear, "We did it, baby." We actually did it. We got married 2 months later. Those early years of his career were lean but hopeful. We lived in a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls and a bathroom door that wouldn't close properly, but we were building something together. I kept working nights so I could be awake when he came home so we could share dinner and talk about our days. He was working at a small firm then, taking any case they'd give him, learning the ropes and dreaming of partnership. "One day we'll have a house," he promised me as we lay in our second-hand bed, listening to our neighbors argue through the walls. "A real house with a garden for you and an office for me. We'll fill it with kids and laughter and everything we never had growing up." I believed every word. By the time Corey made partner 8 years later, we had our house, a beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms and the garden he'd promised. We had our children too, Marcus, born when Corey was finally stable in his career, and Jasmine, who came 2 years later when we thought our family was complete. I switched to day shifts so I could be home with them in the evenings, helping with homework and cooking family dinners and creating the life we'd both dreamed of. Those were the golden years. Corey would come home from the office and tell me about his cases over dinner while Marcus and Jasmine chattered about school and friends and weekend plans. We went on family vacations to Disney World and the beach, took Christmas card photos in matching sweaters, hosted neighborhood barbecues in our backyard. I thought we had made it. I thought we were living proof that love and hard work could build something lasting. But children grow up. Dreams evolve. And apparently so do the people you build your life around. Marcus graduated college 3 years ago and moved to Chicago for his engineering job. Jasmine finished her master's degree last spring and took a position in Seattle. Suddenly, our 4-bedroom house felt cavernous and quiet. The dinner table that once buzzed with conversation now seated 2 people who seemed to have run out of things to say to each other. "This is our time now," I told Corey that first week after Jasmine moved out. "We can travel, take up hobbies together, remember what it was like before kids." But instead of growing closer, we seemed to drift further apart. It started with small things. Corey began working later, claiming new clients needed extra attention. He changed his phone password, something he'd never done in 28 years of marriage. He started buying expensive cologne, styling his graying hair differently, wearing shirts I'd never seen before. When I complimented his new look, he brushed off my comments like they embarrassed him. "Just trying to stay current," he'd mumble, avoiding my eyes. The late nights became routine. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5. He'd come home after I was already in bed, slip under the covers smelling like that new cologne and whisper that he'd eaten dinner at the office. In the morning, he'd be gone before I woke up, leaving only a coffee mug in the sink and a hastily scribbled note about another late day ahead. Our conversations became functional. "The lawn needs cutting. Your mother called. Don't wait up tonight." We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing the same space, and when I tried to address it, he accused me of being clingy. "We're not 20-somethings anymore, Christine," he said one evening when I suggested we go out for dinner like we used to. "We don't need to be attached at the hip." But I wasn't asking to be attached at the hip. I was asking to feel like his wife instead of his housekeeper. The final warning sign came 6 months ago. I had surprised him at his office with lunch from his favorite deli, something I used to do regularly when the kids were small. His secretary, Mrs. Patterson, looked confused when I introduced myself. "Mrs. Jones?" "But I thought," she caught herself, her face flushing red. "Oh, you're Corey's wife." "Of course. He's in a meeting right now." Through his office window, I could see him on the phone, alone, laughing at something whoever was on the other end had said. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in months, genuine, delighted, completely absorbed. When he saw me standing there with the bag of food, his face fell like I'd caught him doing something wrong. "Christine, what are you doing here?" Not "what a nice surprise" or "thanks for lunch." Just confusion and something that looked almost like annoyance. I should have demanded answers then. I should have confronted the growing distance, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd started treating our marriage like an obligation instead of a choice. But I was a nurse, trained to care for others before myself. I was a mother, programmed to keep the peace and hold the family together. I was a wife who had spent 32 years believing that love and loyalty were enough to weather any storm. So I handed him his lunch with a smile, kissed his cheek, and pretended not to notice how quickly he pulled away. That's what 32 years of devotion looks like when it's taken for granted. You become invisible in your own life, a background character in someone else's story. You work and sacrifice and build and nurture until you've given so much of yourself away that there's barely anything left. But that day in the hospital, watching my husband feed applesauce to another woman while wearing the watch I'd saved months to buy him, that was the day I remembered who I used to be before I became Corey's everything. That was the day I decided to take myself back. But taking yourself back requires knowing exactly what you're taking yourself back from. And that meant I had to stop being willfully blind to what was happening in my own marriage. It started with his phone. For 32 years, Corey and I had shared everything. Passwords, bank accounts, dreams, fears, we were partners in the truest sense. So when he suddenly became protective of his phone, holding it face down during dinner and taking it with him to the bathroom, my nursing instincts kicked in. Something was wrong and I needed to diagnose the problem. The opportunity came 3 weeks after that disastrous office visit. Corey had rushed out of the house for an emergency meeting, leaving his phone charging on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I picked it up, my fingers trembling as I entered what I hoped was still his passcode, our wedding anniversary. It worked. I scrolled through his contacts with the methodical precision I'd learned from 20 years of reading patient charts. Most of the names were familiar, colleagues, family members, our mutual friends. But then I saw it tucked between Larry, Jim, and Mom, Lakeisha with a heart emoji. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked on the contact. The phone number meant nothing to me, but seeing it there, seeing her name in his phone with that little red heart, made everything real in a way I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't paranoia or middle-aged insecurity. This was confirmation. I quickly memorized the number and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. When Corey returned an hour later, I was folding laundry in the living room, acting like the dutiful wife who suspected nothing. "How was your meeting?" I asked without looking up from his shirts. "Fine. Just fine." His voice sounded strange, strained. "Client emergency. You know how it is." But I was beginning to suspect I didn't know how anything was anymore. The next day, while Corey was at work, I did something I never thought I'd do in 32 years of marriage. I went through his things. Not snooping, I told myself. Investigating. There's a difference when your whole life is at stake. I started with his dresser, methodically checking pockets and drawers with the same thoroughness I used to inventory medical supplies. In the back of his sock drawer, hidden beneath winter thermal underwear he hadn't worn in years, I found them, receipts. Dozens of them, all from jewelry stores I'd never been to, for items I'd never received. My hands trembled as I spread them across our bed. Tiffany earrings, $1,200. Pandora bracelet, $850. A necklace from K Jewelers, $2,300. The dates went back 8 months, and the total amount made my stomach lurch. We were talking about thousands of dollars, money from our joint account, money I'd helped earn during all those extra nursing shifts. But the receipt that nearly broke me was the smallest one. A simple gold chain from a boutique downtown, purchased just 2 weeks ago. Written on the back in Corey's handwriting was a note, "For Elle until you're feeling better. Love always, C." Love always. I sat on our bed, the bed where we'd made love, raised babies, whispered dreams, and felt something die inside my chest. This wasn't just physical betrayal. This was emotional intimacy, financial deception, and something that looked suspiciously like love. That night, I pretended to read while Corey worked on his laptop in the living room. But I was actually listening, training my nurse's ear to catch every word, every inflection, every pause in his conversations. Around 10 o'clock, his phone rang, and I heard him answer in a voice I hadn't heard him use with me in years, soft, concerned, infinitely tender. "Hey, beautiful, how are you feeling tonight?" I gripped my book so tightly the pages wrinkled. I know. I wish I could be there too. But visiting hours are almost over and you need your rest. Visiting hours. My blood turned to ice water. The doctor said what? No, that's normal after what you've been through. You're going to be fine, I promise. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. I heard him moving around, probably pacing the way he did when he was worried about something important. Lakeisha, listen to me. You're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. I'm not going anywhere, you hear me? Call lasted 20 more minutes, filled with reassurances and promises and the kind of intimate conversation married couples have during health scares. Except he wasn't having it with his wife. He was having it with a woman whose name I'd found in his phone with a heart emoji. After he hung up, I heard him typing furiously on his laptop. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened as he made another call. Dr. Martinez? Corey Jones. I'm calling about Lakeisha Williams. Yes, I'm her emergency contact. I wanted to check on her progress and see if there's anything else she needs. Emergency contact. The words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years of marriage, I had been Corey's emergency contact. He had been mine. It was one of those small, intimate details that meant everything. The person who would be called if something terrible happened, the person trusted to make life or death decisions. And he had given that role to someone else. The next morning, after Corey left for work earlier than usual, I called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 3 years. Instead of caring for patients, I was about to become my own detective. I had a name, a phone number, and the knowledge that this Lakeisha person was in some kind of medical situation. It was time to find out exactly what I was dealing with. I drove to the courthouse where Corey worked, parking across the street with a clear view of the exit. 10:30 a.m., I watched my husband walk out of the building, get in his car, and drive in the opposite direction of home. I followed him through downtown traffic, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the radio. He led me straight to Mercy General Hospital. I watched from the parking garage as he walked through the main entrance carrying flowers and what looked like a small gift bag. He moved with purpose, familiarity. This wasn't his first visit. I waited 15 minutes, then followed him inside, staying far enough behind to avoid being seen but close enough to track his movements. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. Cardiac and trauma recovery. The nurse's station. I used my professional credentials to access the patient directory. I'm looking for a patient named Lakeisha Williams, I told the charge nurse. I'm RN Jones from County General, and her family asked me to check on her. Oh yes, room 314. Poor thing was in a terrible car accident 2 weeks ago. Her fiancé has been here every day. Such a devoted man. Her fiancé. The floor tilted beneath my feet. Yes, very devoted, I managed to say. Are you family too? The nurse asked kindly. I looked down the hall toward room 314, where my husband was probably sitting beside another woman's bed, holding her hand and whispering the same sweet words he used to whisper to me. Something like that, I said. As I walked back to my car, everything clicked into place with terrible clarity. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the expensive jewelry, the emergency contact status. Corey wasn't just having an affair. He was living a double life. And worse than that, he was playing the role of devoted partner to a woman in the hospital while his actual wife sat at home, completely unaware that she'd been replaced. But here's what Corey didn't know about the woman he'd married 32 years ago. Nurses are trained observers. We notice details, track patterns, and most importantly, we don't give up when a patient's life is on the line. And my life was definitely on the line. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the evidence I'd gathered. Jewelry receipts, notes I'd taken about his phone calls, the hospital information. What I was looking at wasn't just an affair. This was systematic deception on a level that made my 32 years of marriage feel like an elaborate lie. But I needed more information before I could act. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called the hospital back and spoke to a different nurse on the cardiac floor. I'm trying to coordinate flowers for Lakeisha Williams in room 314, I said, using my most professional voice. Can you tell me what name to put on the card for her husband? Oh, you mean Corey? Corey Jones. Such a sweet man. He's been here every single day since she was admitted. Even sleeps in that uncomfortable chair sometimes. You can tell how much he loves her. The words hit me like a physical blow. He was using his real name. He wasn't even bothering to create a false identity. He was just living as himself with another woman while I existed in some parallel universe where I still believed I was his wife. They make such a lovely couple, the nurse continued. He told me they're planning to get married once she recovers fully. After 2 years together, he said it's time to make it official. 2 years. The phone nearly slipped from my numb fingers. 2 years. I managed to whisper. Yes, that's what he told Dr. Martinez. They've been together for 2 years, and he's been taking care of her through some difficult times. Financial stress, family issues, you know how it is. But he's stood by her through everything. That's real love. I hung up without another word. 2 years meant this started when Jasmine was finishing her master's degree. 2 years meant he'd been building a life with another woman while I was planning our empty nest phase. 2 years meant every late night at the office, every weekend emergency meeting, every time he'd been too tired for conversation or intimacy with me, he'd been saving his energy for her. But I still needed proof. Concrete, undeniable evidence that would hold up in divorce court and in my own shattered heart. That afternoon, while Corey was at the hospital playing devoted fiancé, I did something that would have horrified the trusting wife I'd been just weeks ago. I hired a private investigator. And not just any private investigator, I called my sister Maya. Maya had always been the tough one in our family. While I went into nursing to care for people, she became a private investigator to expose their lies. We'd grown apart over the years, partly because Corey never liked her cynical attitude about marriage and relationships. Now I understood why she'd always seemed skeptical when I talked about my perfect husband. Christine? My God, when was the last time you called me? Maya's voice was warm but surprised. Too long, I admitted. Maya, I need your help. Professional help. What's going on? I told her everything. The phone calls, the jewelry receipts, the hospital visits, the emergency contact revelation. Maya listened without interruption, and I could practically hear her investigator brain cataloging every detail. 2 years, she said finally. This isn't some midlife crisis affair, Christine. This is a parallel life. How much do you know about this Lakeisha person? Almost nothing. Just her name, her age, and that she's in the hospital. Give me 48 hours, Maya said. I'll find out everything there is to know about Lakeisha Williams and exactly how deep this goes. Maya worked fast. Too fast, really, for the kind of news she had to deliver. Christine, you need to sit down for this, she said when she called me back 2 days later. I was already sitting in my car outside the grocery store, afraid to have this conversation in the house where Corey might come home early. Her full name is Lakeisha Williams, 28 years old, works as a customer service representative at a call center downtown. But here's what's going to hurt, sis. I found an apartment lease. My blood turned to ice. What kind of lease? A 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. Both their names are on it. Corey Jones and Lakeisha Williams. The lease started 23 months ago, and the rent is $1,800 a month. He's been paying for it out of an account I traced back to your joint savings. The numbers hit me like successive punches. 23 months. $1,800 every month. That was over $40,000 of our money I'd helped earn, money I'd assumed was going toward our retirement, our future security. There's more, Maya continued gently. I talked to some neighbors. They know him as Lakeisha's boyfriend, then fiancé. He's there most weekends, sometimes during the week. They've seen him bringing groceries, helping her with household repairs, acting like a live-in partner. So he's been maintaining 2 households. 2 lives. My voice sounded strange and hollow to my own ears. It gets worse, Christine. The car accident? I pulled the police report. She was leaving his apartment when it happened. And get this, the emergency room intake form lists her as engaged to Corey Jones. He filed that paperwork himself. I sat in that grocery store parking lot, watching normal people live their normal lives, and felt my entire reality crumble around me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic replacement. While I'd been living as his wife, he'd been creating an entirely separate existence where I didn't exist at all. What are you thinking? Maya asked softly. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that for 32 years I've been playing by rules that only I was following. What do you want to do about it? Question hung in the air between us. What did I want to do? Confront him directly? Demand explanations for the unexplainable? Beg him to choose me over a woman 28 years old who'd been playing house with my husband for 2 years? The old Christine would have done exactly that. The old Christine would have cried and pleaded and tried to win back a man who'd already decided she wasn't worth staying faithful to. But sitting in that parking lot, holding evidence of the most devastating betrayal I could imagine, I realized something important. I didn't want him back. I wanted justice. I want to expose him, I said. I want everyone who thinks he's this devoted, loving man to see exactly who he really is. I want consequences. Real ones. Now you're talking like my sister, Maya said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. But we're going to be smart about this. No emotional confrontations, no dramatic scenes until we're ready. We're going to gather everything, financial records, proof of the double life, documentation of his lies. And then we're going to take him apart piece by piece. What do you need from me? Access to your financial records, his computer if possible, and most importantly, I need you to act completely normal until we're ready to move. Can you do that? Can you smile and play the loving wife while we build our case? I thought about the man who would come home tonight, probably tired from spending the day at another woman's bedside, who would expect me to heat up his dinner and ask about his day and pretend I didn't know he was living an elaborate lie. I can do that, I said. I've been playing the loving wife for 2 years while he built a life with someone else. I can keep playing it for a few more weeks. Good. Because when we're done, Corey Jones is going to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been taking care of people her whole life. We're about to show him that nurses know how to fight for their patients' lives. And what am I the patient for? Your own life, Christine. Your dignity, your financial security, your future. Everything he tried to steal from you while you weren't looking. As I drove home to cook dinner for a man who was engaged to another woman, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, that died in the hospital room. But hope that I could survive this. Hope that I could come out stronger. And hope that Corey Jones was about to learn exactly what kind of woman he'd been betraying for 2 years. Maya and I spent 3 days planning what she called the performance of your lifetime. We needed Corey to believe I was broken, defeated, and most importantly, out of the way. The goal was to create an opening for him to make the kind of mistake that would give us everything we needed for court. Men like Corey get comfortable in their lies, Maya explained as we sat in her office, surrounded by surveillance equipment and legal documents. He's been managing 2 lives for 2 years, which means he thinks he's smarter than everyone around him. We're going to use that arrogance against him. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would stage a breakdown, tell Corey I needed space to think about our marriage, and leave the house for what appeared to be an extended stay with Maya. But instead of actually leaving town, I'd be watching, recording, documenting every move he made when he thought he was free to do whatever he wanted. The key is selling the vulnerability, Maya said, adjusting a tiny camera disguised as a decorative picture frame. You need to seem fragile, not suspicious. Defeated, not angry. Can you do that? Looking at my reflection in her office mirror, I barely recognized myself. 3 weeks of investigating my husband's betrayal had carved new lines around my eyes and stolen the softness from my face. Selling vulnerability wouldn't require much acting. I've been practicing defeated for 32 years, I said. I think I can manage it. We placed cameras in 5 strategic locations throughout the house: the living room, kitchen, master bedroom, and the guest room where Corey had been sleeping more frequently. Maya's equipment was sophisticated enough to capture both video and audio, and small enough to blend seamlessly into our home decor. Remember, Maya said as she tested the final connection, once you leave that house, you cannot go back until we have what we need. No matter what you see, no matter how angry you get, you have to let him hang himself with his own choices. Friday evening, I waited until Corey came home from his latest client meeting, which I now knew was actually another hospital visit. He looked tired, emotionally drained, like a man who'd been caring for someone he loved. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my life. "Corey, we need to talk," I said, sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. He froze in the doorway, still wearing his coat. About what? About us. About our marriage. About why I feel like I'm living with a stranger. I'd rehearsed this speech with Maya, practicing the exact tone of voice, the precise amount of pain to reveal without seeming suspicious. I needed to sound like a woman questioning herself, not a woman who'd already found the answers. Christine, what are you talking about? He sat across from me, but his body language was defensive, guarded. You're never here anymore. When you are here, you're somewhere else mentally. We don't talk, we don't connect, we barely touch. I let my voice crack on the last word. I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't understand why. That's ridiculous. I'm working hard to secure our future. I thought you'd appreciate that. Our future. I looked directly into his eyes, letting him see genuine pain there, not because I was losing him, but because I'd already lost him without knowing it. What future, Corey? When was the last time we talked about traveling together or plans for retirement or anything beyond your work schedule? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We're going through an adjustment period. Kids are gone, we're getting older. Things change. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, I said, allowing tears to well in my eyes. I'm afraid we've changed so much that there's nothing left to save. For a moment, something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, or recognition of the pain he was causing. But it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. What do you want me to say, Christine? I want you to tell me if there's any point in fighting for this marriage. I want to know if you still love me or if I'm just convenient. The word hung between us like a challenge. Corey looked down at his hands, and I watched him make a choice. Not the choice to confess, not the choice to fight for what we'd built together, but the choice to take the easy way out. Maybe some time apart would be good for both of us, he said finally. Give us space to figure out what we really want. The ease with which he agreed to separate, the relief I could see in his shoulders, told me everything I needed to know about where his heart really was. You're right, I whispered, wiping at my eyes. Maybe I should stay with Maya for a while. Just until we both get some clarity. How long are you thinking? I don't know. A week? 2 weeks? However long it takes to figure out if we still have a marriage worth saving. He nodded, already mentally planning what he'd do with an empty house. That sounds reasonable. I packed a bag the next morning while Corey was at work, making sure to include enough clothes for an extended stay. I hugged him goodbye at the front door, playing the role of the confused, heartbroken wife who still loved him despite everything. Take care of yourself, I said, meaning it in ways he couldn't possibly understand. You too. Call me if you need anything. As I drove away from our house, the house I'd helped him buy, the house where I'd raised our children, the house that contained 32 years of memories, I felt something unexpected. Excitement. For the first time in months, I was taking action instead of just enduring. I was fighting back. Maya had rented a small apartment 2 blocks away, close enough for optimal surveillance but far enough to avoid accidental encounters. We'd set up a command center in the living room with multiple monitors showing feeds from each camera in my house. Now we wait, Maya said, settling into the chair next to mine. And we watch your husband show you exactly who he really is. We didn't have to wait long. 2:30 p.m. on Sunday, less than 24 hours after I'd left, I watched Corey's car pull into our driveway. But he wasn't alone. Through the camera position to capture the front entrance, I saw him helping a young woman out of the passenger seat. She moved carefully, like someone still recovering from injury, and he supported her with the gentleness of a devoted caregiver. Keisha Williams was finally seeing our house. Deep breaths, Maya said, watching my hands clench into fists. Remember, we need him to make mistakes. The bigger the better. I watched my husband help another woman up the front steps of our home. I watched him unlock the door and guide her inside like she belonged there. I watched him give her a tour of the house I'd decorated, showing her photos of our children, our family vacations, our life together. But the moment that broke something fundamental inside my chest was when the bedroom camera activated. I watched Corey lead Lakeisha into our master bedroom, the room where we'd made love, where I'd cried over infertility struggles, where we'd whispered dreams and fears and promises. I watched him help her sit on my side of the bed. I watched him bring her water and medication. I watched him kiss her forehead and tell her she could rest as long as she needed. "He's making her comfortable," I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. "He's making a mistake," Maya corrected. "A big one. Adultery is one thing in divorce court. But bringing his mistress into the marital home while his wife is supposedly just taking space to think? That's abandonment. That's intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's evidence of a man who's already mentally divorced from his marriage." On the monitor, I watched Corey tuck blankets around Lakeisha with the same care he'd once shown me during my recovery from surgery. I watched him stroke her hair and whisper something that made her smile. I watched my husband treat another woman like she was his wife in the bed where he'd promised to forsake all others. "How long do we let this go on?" I asked. Maya looked at the monitors, at the evidence accumulating in real time, at the man who was handing us everything we needed to destroy him in court. "As long as it takes," she said. "He's giving us a gift, Christine. He's documenting his own betrayal. All we have to do is let him keep talking." And talk he did. Over the next 3 days, those cameras captured conversations that would haunt me forever and give me everything I needed to take my life back. The first morning was almost bearable. I watched Corey bring Lakeisha breakfast in bed, our bed, and help her with her medication. It hurt, but it was the kind of caretaking behavior I could understand. She was recovering from an accident after all, and despite everything, I was still a nurse. I could appreciate compassionate care, even when it was being given to the woman who'd stolen my husband. But by the second day, what I was witnessing through those cameras wasn't caregiving anymore. It was replacement. "Oh my God," Maya breathed, pointing at the bedroom monitor. "Is she going through your jewelry box?" I watched in stunned silence as Lakeisha sat at my vanity, the antique dressing table Corey had restored for our 10th anniversary, systematically trying on my jewelry. She held up my pearl earrings to the light, the ones Corey had given me for our 25th anniversary. She fastened my grandmother's gold bracelet around her wrist, admiring how it looked against her skin. "These are beautiful," she said to Corey, who was watching from the bed with an indulgent smile. "Where did they come from?" "Just some old things that were left here," he said casually. "The previous owner had terrible taste, but a few pieces are worth keeping." Previous owner. The words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't his estranged wife taking time to think. I wasn't even his ex-wife. In Corey's narrative, I was just some previous owner who'd left behind unwanted belongings. "Well, I love this bracelet," Lakeisha said, still admiring my grandmother's jewelry in the mirror. "It goes perfectly with my skin tone." "Then it's yours," Corey said. "Everything in that box is yours now." I gripped the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles went white. Maya placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, but her eyes never left the monitors. "We're recording everything," she reminded me quietly. "Let him keep talking." Over the next hour, I watched Lakeisha explore my house like she was shopping for furniture. She moved through our living room, rearranging throw pillows and commenting on which pieces she liked and which needed to go. She stood in front of our family photo wall, 32 years of memories, from wedding pictures to baby photos to graduation ceremonies, and pointed to specific frames. "Who are all these people?" she asked Corey. He glanced at the photos with the detached interest of someone looking at strangers' vacation pictures. "Just some old family stuff. We'll replace all of this with our own memories. Our own memories." "This woman appears in a lot of them," Lakeisha said, pointing to a picture of me holding newborn Marcus. "She looks familiar. Did I meet her somewhere?" "That's Christine," Corey said, and the casual way he spoke my name like I was an acquaintance he barely remembered made my chest tighten with rage. "She's just someone I used to know. She lived here before, but that's all over now. Someone he used to know. I had supported this man through law school, raised his children, built his home, shared his bed for 32 years, and I was just someone he used to know. She's pretty, Lakeisha said, studying the photo of me at our wedding. I was 28 then, radiant in my white dress, looking at Corey like he was my entire future. What happened to her? She got old, Corey said with a shrug. Some people just don't age well. They get comfortable, stop taking care of themselves, stop being interesting. You know how it is. I looked down at my hands that had worked countless double shifts to support his dreams, hands that had changed his children's diapers and held them through nightmares, hands that had cared for thousands of patients over 3 decades of nursing, hands that showed the evidence of a life spent caring for others. Well, her loss is my gain, Lakeisha said, and I watched her take down our wedding photo and set it aside. This house has good bones, but it needs a complete makeover. Everything is so dated. That's exactly what I was thinking, Corey agreed. Or we could sell this old place and start fresh somewhere more modern. Somewhere that's just ours. Casual way they discussed dismantling my life, selling the house I'd helped buy, erasing the family I'd helped create was breathtaking in its cruelty. But I forced myself to keep watching as Lakeisha continued her inspection tour. In the kitchen, she opened cabinets and critiqued my dishes. These plates are hideous. And who needs this many coffee mugs? She started pulling items out and setting them on the counter. We'll donate all of this and start over with something more stylish. Those coffee mugs represented years of family breakfasts, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet conversations over late-night cups of tea. Each one had a story, souvenirs from family vacations, gifts from the children, novelty mugs that had made us laugh. To Lakeisha, they were just clutter to be eliminated. But the moment that truly broke my heart came when she discovered my nursing uniform still hanging in the bedroom closet. "What are these awful things?" she asked, holding up one of my scrubs with obvious disgust. "Work clothes," Corey said dismissively. Christine was a nurse. Not exactly a glamorous profession. Not exactly glamorous. 30 years of saving lives, comforting families, working through exhaustion and heartbreak and the daily weight of human suffering, and it wasn't exactly glamorous. "Well, these need to go immediately," Lakeisha said, pulling my uniforms from their hangers. "The whole closet smells like hospital." I watched her bundle my scrubs into a trash bag, along with my comfortable nursing shoes and the cardigan I wore during long night shifts. As she worked, she continued talking to Corey about their plans. "Once we get rid of all this old stuff, we can really make this place ours," she said. "New furniture, new decorations, maybe knock down some walls to open things up. It'll be like starting completely fresh." "Whatever you want, baby," Corey said, watching her with obvious adoration. "This is your house now. Your house now." But the worst was yet to come. On the 3rd day, I watched Lakeisha discover my nursing awards in the home office, certificates of recognition for excellent patient care, commendations for going above and beyond during emergencies, a plaque honoring my 30 years of service to County General. "Look at all these dusty old certificates," she said to Corey. "Who keeps this kind of junk?" "Christine was always sentimental about meaningless things," he replied. "She never knew how to let go of the past." I watched Lakeisha gather my awards, recognition for decades of dedicated service, acknowledgement of lives I'd helped save, and dump them into a garbage bag. 30 years of professional achievement thrown away like expired coupons. "There," she said, stepping back to admire the now empty wall. "Much better. We can put our vacation photos here instead." Our vacation photos. From trips they'd apparently been taking while I thought my husband was working late. "You know what?" Lakeisha continued, warming to her redecorating theme. "We should take down all these family pictures too. I don't want to look at some other woman's life every day." "Good point," Corey agreed. "Let's box up all the old photos. Maybe donate them or something." I watched my husband help another woman erase every trace of our life together. Wedding photos, baby pictures, family vacations, holiday celebrations, 32 years of memories packed away like unwanted belongings at a garage sale. "This is so exciting," Lakeisha said, surveying the bare walls. "It's like we're creating our own little world here." "Our own little world," Corey repeated, pulling her into his arms. "Just you and me and no baggage from the past. No baggage from the past." That's what I was to him now. Not his wife, not the mother of his children, not his partner of 3 decades. Just baggage from the past, to be disposed of as efficiently as my nursing awards and family photos. "I can't watch any more of this," I said, standing up from the monitoring station. "Yes, you can," Maya said firmly. "Because in 3 days, we've recorded enough evidence to take him for everything he's worth. Adultery, abandonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and financial fraud. He's handed us a divorce case that will make legal history." She was right. As painful as it was to watch, Corey was destroying himself with every casual cruelty, every dismissive comment, every decision to treat our marriage like it had never mattered. "What happens next?" I asked. Maya smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "Next, we remind your husband that the woman he's been dismissing as someone he used to know is about to become someone he'll never forget." But before we could plan our confrontation, Maya insisted we needed to understand everything about Lakeisha's hospitalization. "Something doesn't add up," she said, reviewing her notes. "Car accidents don't usually result in psychiatric evaluations, and the timeline is suspicious." Corey became her emergency contact exactly 2 weeks before the accident happened. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need the full medical records. And lucky for us, you have access to hospital databases that most people don't." She was right. Through 30 years as a registered nurse, I had professional relationships at every major hospital in the city. More importantly, I had legitimate access to medical records through the nursing network, a privilege I'd never abused in 3 decades of practice. Until now. The next morning, I called my former colleague Sarah Martinez, who worked as a charge nurse at Mercy General. We'd trained together, covered each other's shifts, shared countless stories about difficult patients and demanding doctors. If anyone would help me access information I needed, it would be Sarah. "Christine, what a surprise." Sarah's voice was warm and familiar. "I heard through the grapevine that you were taking some time off. Everything okay?" "Family issues," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "Sarah, I need a favor. Professional consultation on a case that might impact my family." "What kind of consultation?" I took a deep breath. "I need to review medical records for a patient named Lakeisha Williams. She was admitted about 3 weeks ago after what was reported as a car accident." There was a pause. "Christine, you know I can't just pull random patient files. What's your connection to this case?" "Her emergency contact is someone I know personally. I'm concerned about potential family dynamics that might affect her recovery and safety." It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a complete lie either. Sarah had worked with me long enough to understand that sometimes nurses needed to protect patients from complicated family situations. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. "I'll pull the file and call you back." Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Maya and I sat in our makeshift command center, watching Corey and Lakeisha continue their domestic fantasy on the monitors while I waited for information that might change everything. When Sarah called back, her voice was different, professional, careful, concerned. "Christine, I pulled the file and I think you need to see this in person. Can you come to the hospital? There are some things we should discuss privately." An hour later, I sat in Sarah's office while she spread Lakeisha Williams' medical records across her desk. What I saw made my blood run cold. "The initial report listed this as a motor vehicle accident," Sarah said, pointing to the emergency admission form. "Single car collision, patient found unconscious at the scene. But look at the intake notes from the ER physician." I read the doctor's careful handwriting. Patient regained consciousness during treatment. When questioned about the accident, patient became agitated and stated, I just wanted it to stop hurting. Significant emotional distress noted. Psychiatric consultation recommended. Keep reading, Sarah said quietly. The psychiatric evaluation was damning. Dr. Rebecca Chen had interviewed Lakeisha during her second day in the hospital, and her notes painted a picture of profound emotional crisis. Patient reports 2-year relationship with married man who refuses to leave his wife. States she has been living in limbo, waiting for promises that never come true. Admits to feelings of hopelessness about the relationship and her future. When asked directly about the circumstances of the accident, patient broke down and admitted, "I couldn't take waiting anymore. I thought if something happened to me, he'd finally realize how much he loved me." My hand shook as I read the clinical assessment. Suicide attempt by intentional vehicle collision. Patient drove into concrete barrier at approximately 35 miles per hour after argument with boyfriend about timeline for ending his marriage. She tried to kill herself, I whispered. And look at who's listed as her emergency contact on every single form, Sarah said, pointing to signature after signature. Corey Jones, fiancé. Corey Jones, primary contact. Corey Jones, person authorized to make medical decisions. He signed all of these forms, Sarah continued. Insurance authorizations, treatment approvals, psychiatric consultation consent. He's been acting as her next of kin for 3 weeks. But there was more. Dr. Chen's notes included details of conversations she'd had with Corey during Lakeisha's treatment. Emergency contact states patient has been emotionally unstable for several months. Reports she has threatened self-harm before when he tried to take space in their relationship. Contact appears genuinely concerned about patient's mental health but mentions his own wife is also going through emotional difficulties and may need psychiatric evaluation. Contact suggests patient would benefit from extended inpatient mental health treatment. Extended inpatient treatment. My breath caught in my throat. Sarah, what does extended inpatient treatment mean in this context? For a suicide attempt with ongoing emotional instability? We're talking about a potential 72-hour psychiatric hold, possibly longer if the patient is deemed a danger to herself or others. I stared at the records, pieces of a horrific puzzle clicking into place. He's been positioning both of us as mentally unstable. What do you mean? He told the psychiatric team that his wife, me, is going through emotional difficulties and might need evaluation. He's setting up a narrative where both women in his life are psychologically unstable. Sarah's face paled as she understood the implications. Christine, if he's planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, he could control everything. The house, the savings, the divorce proceedings. He could claim I'm too unstable to make rational decisions about the marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Got the financial records. You need to see this immediately. I thanked Sarah and rushed back to our surveillance apartment where Maya had spreadsheets covering every surface. Look at this, she said, pointing to bank statements from our joint savings account. 3 major withdrawals in the past month, all for medical expenses not covered by insurance. The numbers made my stomach lurch. $15,000 for psychiatric consultation and extended care evaluation. $1,000 for private room upgrade and specialized nursing. $12,000 for what was listed as experimental therapy consultation. He's been paying for private psychiatric treatment, Maya said. But here's the interesting part. Look at what he discussed with the billing department. She handed me a transcript she'd somehow obtained of Corey's conversation with the hospital's financial services. Mr. Jones inquired about payment plans for extended psychiatric care for 2 patients, Maya read. He specifically asked about procedures for when family members need to make financial decisions for relatives who are not mentally competent to handle their own affairs. 2 patients. He's been planning to have both of us declared mentally incompetent, I said, the full scope of his manipulation finally becoming clear. Lakeisha because of her suicide attempt and me because of supposed emotional difficulties during our separation. And if you're both declared incompetent, guess who gets to make all the financial and legal decisions? The elegant cruelty of it took my breath away. Corey hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been orchestrating a complete takeover of everyone's lives, positioning himself as the rational, responsible man surrounded by unstable women who needed his protection and control. But he made one critical mistake, Maya said, gathering the medical records and financial documents. He documented everything. Every signature as Lakeisha's fiancé, every payment from your joint account, every conversation about mental competency. It's all evidence of fraud. What kind of fraud? Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. He's been using your money to pay for another woman's medical care while simultaneously building a case to have you declared incompetent. That's not just adultery, Christine. That's criminal. I looked at the monitors showing Corey and Lakeisha in our house, planning their future together while he schemed to destroy both our lives for his convenience. So what do we do now? Maya's smile was sharp and predatory. Now we turn his own plan against him. He wants to play the game of mental competency? Let's show him what a truly strategic mind looks like when it's fighting for survival. How do we do that? We give him exactly what he's been planning, a public confrontation where everyone can see who's really stable and who's been living in a fantasy world built on lies. She was right. Corey had been so busy manipulating the narrative that he'd forgotten one crucial detail. The woman he was trying to destroy had 30 years of experience keeping people alive under pressure. And I was about to show him exactly what that experience looked like when the stakes were my own life. The plan Maya and I devised was elegant in its simplicity. Give Corey exactly what he wanted, a public forum to play the concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife, and then systematically destroy that narrative in front of everyone who mattered to him. We need witnesses, Maya explained as we planned every detail. Not just family, but colleagues, friends, people whose opinions he values. When we expose him, it needs to be complete and irreversible. I called Corey on Thursday evening, putting on the voice of a broken woman ready to surrender. Corey, I've been thinking about what you said. About needing space to figure out what we want. And his voice was cautious but hopeful. I think you're right. I think I've been holding on to something that's already over. I let my voice crack with manufactured emotion. But before we make any final decisions, I'd like to have one last family dinner. Something to honor what we built together, even if we can't save it. There was a long pause. What kind of dinner? Nothing big. Just your parents, my sister, maybe Marcus and Jasmine if they can fly in. A chance to tell everyone together what's happening with our marriage. I think we owe them that much. I could practically hear him calculating the optics. A gracious, mature ending to their marriage, with Corey playing the role of the patient husband who tried everything to save a relationship with an increasingly unstable woman. That sounds reasonable, he said finally. When? Saturday evening? I can cook one last time. Like the old days. All right. Saturday it is. What Corey didn't know was that I'd already been planning this dinner for 3 days. The guest list included not just family but also his law partner David Morrison, our neighbors the Hendersons, my nursing supervisor Janet, and several other people whose respect Corey valued. Maya had contacted each of them personally, explaining that Christine and Corey had an important announcement to make about their marriage. More importantly, Maya had arranged for her associate, attorney Rebecca Foster, to attend as a family friend who just happened to have Christine's best interests at heart. Saturday afternoon, I returned to our house for the first time since I'd left. Corey and Lakeisha had clearly been busy. Many of my personal items were missing, furniture had been rearranged, and the family photos had been replaced with empty frames waiting for new memories. Christine, Corey said when I walked into the kitchen, his voice carefully modulated to sound concerned rather than annoyed. You look tired. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I replied, setting grocery bags on the counter that had once been mine and was now apparently Lakeisha's. About us, about our future, about what's best for everyone. And what have you decided? I've decided that you're right. Some things can't be saved once they're broken. I began unpacking ingredients for his favorite meal, herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables, the dinner I'd made for every special occasion during our marriage. But I want our families to understand why. He relaxed visibly, probably assuming I was preparing to take full responsibility for our marriage's failure. The guests began arriving at 6 o'clock. Corey played the perfect host, greeting everyone with warmth and just the right amount of subdued sadness. He was staging his own performance, positioning himself as the devoted husband dealing gracefully with a difficult situation. "Where's Christine?" his mother asked, looking around the living room where family photos used to hang. "She's in the kitchen," Corey said with a gentle smile. "She's been going through a difficult time lately. Some emotional challenges that have been hard on both of us." Emotional challenges. The groundwork for his mental instability narrative, laid out perfectly in front of witnesses. At 7 o'clock, I called everyone to the dining room. The table was set with our wedding china, the dishes Lakeisha had dismissed as hideous but which represented 12 years of Christmas and anniversary dinners. Corey sat at the head of the table, playing his role as the gracious host, while I served the meal I'd perfected over 3 decades of marriage. "This looks wonderful, Christine," David Morrison said, raising his wine glass. "Corey's told me how much he'll miss your cooking." "Has he?" I said quietly, taking my seat. "That's interesting because I wasn't aware he'd discussed our personal business with colleagues." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Corey's face flushed slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Christine, I think people are just concerned about us," he said in the patient tone one uses with someone who's being unreasonable. "Of course they are. That's why I asked everyone here tonight." I stood up, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Because I have some things I need to share with all of you." "Christine, maybe we should," Corey started. "Maybe we should what, Corey?" "Maybe I should continue pretending that I don't know what's been happening? Maybe I should keep playing the confused, emotionally unstable wife while you rewrite our history?" The dining room fell dead silent. Corey's eyes darted around the table, calculating how to regain control of the narrative. "Christine, you're not well. Everyone can see that you're struggling." "What everyone can see," I interrupted, "is a woman who's finally tired of being gaslit by a man who's been living a double life for 2 years. Marcus's fork clattered to his plate. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, I walked to the living room and returned with a laptop and a small speaker system. "I think it's better if I show you rather than tell you." Corey's face went white. "Christine, what are you doing?" "I'm telling our family the truth." I connected the laptop to the speakers and pulled up the first audio file Maya had prepared. "Let's start with this conversation from 3 days ago." Lakeisha's voice filled the dining room. "Who are all these people in the photos?" Corey's voice followed. "Just some old family stuff. We'll replace all of this with our own memories. This woman appears in a lot of them. She looks familiar." "That's Christine. She's just someone I used to know. She lived here before, but that's all over now." The silence in the room was deafening. I watched Corey's mother's face crumple as she heard her son dismiss his wife of 32 years as someone he used to know. "Christine, where did you get this?" Corey demanded, his composure finally cracking. "From the surveillance cameras Maya and I installed in our house before I left." I gestured toward the door where Maya and Rebecca Foster had just entered. "The same cameras that recorded you bringing another woman into our marriage bed." "You were spying on me?" "I was documenting criminal behavior," Maya said, stepping forward with a thick folder. "Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud." She spread bank statements across the table, next to the dinner plates and wine glasses. "Corey has been using joint marital funds to pay for his girlfriend's medical expenses while simultaneously building a case to have Christine declared mentally incompetent." David Morrison leaned forward, his lawyer instincts engaged. "What kind of medical expenses?" "Psychiatric treatment following a suicide attempt," Rebecca Foster said, pulling out hospital records. Mr. Jones has been acting as emergency contact and medical decision-maker for Ms. Lakeisha Williams while she receives treatment for intentionally crashing her car. The gasps around the table were audible. Corey's father pushed back from the table, staring at his son like he'd never seen him before. A suicide attempt? Janet, my nursing supervisor, asked. Corey, you've been managing medical care for someone who's not a family member? It's not what it looks like, Corey started. It's exactly what it looks like, Maya interrupted, playing another audio file. This time it was Corey's voice. She got old. Some people just don't age well. They get comfortable, stop taking care of themselves, stop being interesting. My mother-in-law made a choking sound. But that's not the worst part, I said, my voice steady and clear. The worst part is that he's been telling medical professionals that I'm also mentally unstable and might need psychiatric evaluation. He's been positioning both of us as incompetent so he could control our finances and legal decisions. Rebecca Foster placed a legal document in front of Corey. These are divorce papers, already filed. Christine is citing adultery, financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's also filing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. You can't prove any of this, Corey said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can. Maya held up a flash drive. 3 weeks of video and audio surveillance showing you bringing your girlfriend into the marital home, helping her dispose of Christine's personal belongings, and planning to sell this house without your wife's knowledge or consent. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Dad, is this true? Have you been cheating on Mom? Son, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Jasmine said, tears streaming down her face. It's betrayal. The room erupted in voices, family members demanding explanations, David Morrison asking legal questions, neighbors expressing shock and disgust. In the middle of it all, Corey sat frozen, watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse around him. There's one more thing, I said, and the room fell quiet again. The divorce settlement includes full custody of this house, half of all assets including his law practice, and spousal support based on 32 years of marriage. The criminal charges include restitution for all marital funds used for his girlfriend's medical care. Rebecca Foster handed him another set of papers. You're also being served with a restraining order prohibiting contact with Christine except through legal counsel. As Corey read the documents, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally resignation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete control over my own life. The dinner was delicious, by the way, I said, gathering my purse and walking toward the door. It's the last meal I'll ever cook for you. And with that, I walked out of the house where I'd spent 32 years being taken for granted, leaving behind a man who'd finally learned the difference between a devoted wife and someone you used to know. 5 months later, I sat in my new apartment, a bright, airy space overlooking the city, furnished with items I'd chosen for myself, reading the final court documents that officially ended my marriage and began my new life. The legal consequences for Corey were swift and devastating. The State Bar Association moved quickly once Rebecca Foster presented evidence of his fraudulent behavior. Using client trust account procedures to manipulate medical and financial documents, lying about his marital status on legal forms, and attempting to defraud insurance companies, these weren't just personal ethical lapses. They were violations that struck at the heart of legal practice. Corey Jones has been permanently disbarred, Maya told me over coffee at my favorite new cafe. His law license is gone, his partnership dissolved, and he owes you $180,000 in restitution for marital funds used fraudulently. The money wasn't what mattered most, though it certainly helped with starting over at 55. What mattered was that his ability to manipulate legal systems, the tool he'd used to try to control both Lakeisha and me, had been permanently taken away. What happened to the house? I asked. Sold as per the divorce decree. Your half of the proceeds, plus the alimony settlement, means you never have to work again if you don't want to. But I did want to work. Through 3 decades of nursing, caring for patients wasn't just my profession, it was who I was. The difference now was that I was returning to it as Christine Jones, not as Corey's wife who happened to be a nurse. "I start back at County General next week," I told Maya. "Same hospital where I met him, but this time I'm there for me." The emotional closure had taken longer than the legal resolution. 4 months after the divorce, I'd wake up expecting to hear Corey's voice in the kitchen or his car in the driveway. 32 years of shared routine doesn't disappear overnight, even when the person you shared it with turns out to be a stranger. But gradually, I began to understand the difference between a marriage certificate and true partnership. A marriage certificate is just a legal document. It can be signed by people who lie, who manipulate, who take vows they never intend to keep. True partnership requires daily choice, mutual respect, and the kind of honesty that builds trust instead of destroying it. A man who can lie to his wife for years can lie to anyone about anything, I wrote in my journal one evening, thinking about the colleagues who'd trusted Corey, the clients who'd believed in his integrity, the family members who'd looked up to him. Betrayal is never contained to just one relationship. It spreads like infection, touching everyone who believed in the person behind the lies. The hardest part wasn't grieving the marriage, it was forgiving myself for staying blind to obvious signs for so long. I was a trained medical professional, skilled at recognizing symptoms and diagnosing problems. How had I missed the symptoms of deception in my own home? "Because you loved him," my new therapist explained during one of our sessions. And love makes us want to believe the best in people, even when evidence suggests otherwise. That's not a weakness, Christine. That's what makes you good at caring for others. Learning to trust my instincts again took time and practice. But slowly I began to recognize the difference between intuition and paranoia, between healthy skepticism and learned helplessness. As for Lakeisha, I chose to see her as another victim rather than the villain in my story. Through mutual acquaintances at the hospital, I learned she'd entered intensive therapy to address the emotional instability that had led to her suicide attempt. Without Corey's influence and promises, she was finally getting the help she needed to build a life based on reality rather than fantasy. She sends her apologies through her therapist, Maya told me one afternoon. Apparently, she had no idea you didn't know about the relationship. Corey told her you were already separated and that the divorce was just a formality. Even in his affair, Corey had been lying to everyone involved. "I hope she finds peace," I said, and meant it. "She's young enough to build something real with someone who's actually available." My new beginning started small but significant. I moved into an apartment I could afford on my nursing salary alone. I bought furniture that reflected my taste, not compromise between his preferences and mine. I joined a book club, took a painting class, and started hiking on weekends with a group of women who became friends rather than obligations. Most importantly, I learned to live for myself instead of living as half of a couple that had never been as united as I'd believed. The nursing supervisor position opened up at County General 8 months after my divorce was finalized. For the first time in my career, I applied for a promotion based solely on my qualifications, not on what would be convenient for my husband's schedule. "The job is yours," Janet told me during the interview. "You've earned it." Standing in the same hospital where I'd met Corey 33 years earlier, wearing scrubs that no one would throw away as awful, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pride in my own accomplishments. That evening, I called Marcus and Jasmine to share the news about my promotion. Both of my children had struggled with their father's betrayal, questioning everything they'd believed about love, marriage, and family stability. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Marcus said. "Not just for getting the promotion, but for how you handled everything. You could have fallen apart, but instead you fought back." "I almost did fall apart," I admitted. But then I remembered that I'd been taking care of people my whole life. It was time to take care of myself with the same determination. "Do you ever regret staying with Dad for so long?" Jasmine asked. It was a question I'd asked myself countless times. "I regret staying blind to who he really was," I said finally. "But I don't regret the life we built together because that life gave me you too. And everything I learned about love and sacrifice and resilience, all of that made me strong enough to survive losing him." As I sit here now, a year and a half after that devastating day in the hospital room, I want to leave you with this. If you're watching this story and your gut is telling you something's wrong in your relationship, trust that feeling. Don't make excuses for behavior that doesn't align with promises made. Don't sacrifice your peace of mind for someone else's convenience. 30 years taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. Real love doesn't require you to become smaller, quieter, or more convenient. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore your instincts or doubt your worth. Did you like my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Give us a like if you enjoyed this story. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. It encourages me to keep bringing more stories like this. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.